Yeah. Do a program. Yeah. That's a bigger question.
Okay. Elaine, you're going to give me the 5, 4? No, I just my watch is finally running. Remember your audience.
This is my audience.
No one else matters.
Oh, everyone matters. So, are you going to tell me when to start?
He's going to give you the count.
Okay.
Am I off camera here?
No teleprompter?
I wish.
This is what I need. Or do I do the Trumpling? Go. Shana Tova. I'm Elaine Fieldman, Vice President of Congregation for Humanistic Judaism of Metro Detroit and co-chair of the Outreach Committee. I'm here to talk about membership and to ask those of you who are members to become ambassadors of our congregation. Some of my remarks are generalizations of studies and reports I've read about over the past few years, and some are my own personal experiences. Generalizations. Good news. The non-theist population is growing, even here in the U.S. I mean, the head chaplain at Harvard is a non-theist. Bad news. Non-theists are said to be non-joiners. But is that really true? They join book clubs, movie clubs, political parties, gardening clubs, ACLU, the zoo, even country clubs. So why are they deemed non-joiners of religious, spiritual institutions? I submit part of the reason is they don't know about us or understand who and what we are. I suggest we examine why us members are members, and I hope to speak with many of you and explore your answer. I'm going to tell you my abbreviated story. I joined Temple in 1995 with my ex-husband, who wasn't raised Jewish, and my 5-year-old daughter. We were both non-theists. My daughter hadn't made up her mind yet. Of course, she was only 5. While I was bedridden during my pregnancy, and at my aunt's suggestion, Mark, my ex, attended an Introduction to Judaism class at a Reformed temple. He very much enjoyed the class, and at its conclusion, the cantor spoke with him about possibly taking it to the next step and converting to Judaism. Mark explained that while he enjoyed learning about the history and traditions of the Jewish people, he felt uncomfortable with the God stuff. The cantor said that wasn't a problem. He too was an atheist. Just go through the motions. It will be fine. As an aside, a good friend of mine who was very observant told me that the then cantor of her conservative synagogue is an atheist. She loves listening to him sing. He is so inspirational. He then left that synagogue and moved out of state. So there are, and we know there are, and we've heard about them, clergy who believe as we do, but pretend otherwise. We, on the other hand, strive to say what we mean and mean what we say. I used to be grateful for the Orthodox and the observant, thinking they had the responsibility to keep our story going and alive, because I couldn't do it. I've done a 180 on that philosophy. We do have that responsibility. We are in charge of keeping our story alive. So my ex and I joined in 1995 because I primarily wanted Erica, my daughter, to be exposed to Jewish history, tradition, and customs without prayer and with a sense of human strength and responsibility. Knowing the history and who preceded her was important to me. Let's face it, according to Ancestry, I'm 100% Ashkenazi Jew. And according to 23andMe, she's 50% Ashkenazi Jew. And where do you think she got that from? This place was the perfect fit. When I attended my first Rosh Hashanah service, which was very different from any service I had previously attended, I was moved. The readings meant something, and I did separate myself from everything else going on and just reflected on the past year and the responsibility of us as human beings. Being Jewish and the holidays are part of my story, whether it's the food that goes along with the holiday, which is always the case, Hanukkah parties, studying the Holocaust, worrying about anti-Semitism, debating about whether so-and-so is Jewish, learning Mahjong. It's a major part of me. Think about it. Other than the really observant, do most of your Jewish friends focus on praying or on Jewish food, customs, history, shtick, etc.? Most of my Jewish friends who claim to be more observant than me hardly go to services. I certainly go to services far more frequently than any of them, except for two. One who is very observant, and Kathy Radner, who's sitting right over there and who is a member of our wonderful congregation. It is so much a part of me that now Erica, who has a 3-month-old baby, recently said to me, and she and her husband are both non-theists, that I now have the responsibility of hosting Jewish holiday get-togethers. I suggest to you that the temple, any temple, is more than a place to pray. It's a place for community, to share common interests, to support others in times of need, to make a difference in the greater community, to study and learn. We study tradition and create our own tradition, just like our ancestors did, and our families do. I have 2 short experiences I want to share with you. One, a very good friend of mine several years ago relayed a conversation she had with her conservative rabbi's wife. She mentioned to the wife that her friend, me, belonged to the Birmingham Temple, as it was known at that time. The woman said some unkind words. My friend replied, "It's better than nothing." Incident 2, I was at a dinner party hosted by Temple members. Another guest, who was not a Temple member, was sitting next to me and commented that Rabbi Wein shouldn't be a rabbi. He is very smart, very educated, but he should be a professor. I'm ashamed to say I didn't properly respond to either of these comments, and I don't think those types of comments are unusual. If you are confronted by such unkind words, please respond respectfully how important the congregation is to you. Please think of becoming an ambassador to educate and inform the greater community about who and what we are, and not just in response to unkind words, but to increase our visibility and our membership. On that note, in the past, we have received many high holiday donations from friends who are not members, but have enjoyed our services. I have great news for you. We have totally revamped our due structure. It's pay what you feel comfortable paying. We have suggested donation levels, but they are not mandatory. If you are considering making a donation, turn it into membership. You will receive all the benefits that come with membership, including access to certain activities and classes that are limited to members. Visit our website at chj.detroit-detroit.org or call the temple and speak with Anne Marie Fisher. Thank you for your time, and Shana Tova.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Welcome, everybody, to our second year of virtual services. Not quite the same as last year. This year, we have live participants. They're sitting over here. You guys can clap, so we'll know that you're there. There they are. And they are our readers tonight: Yossi Bengal, Bobby Slade, Rabbi Miriam Jerris, Charlie Paul, Rob Lasker, Sandy Altman, and Natan Fuchs. Elaine, who you've just met, and Kathy Radner, together with Elaine's partner, John Naffler, will momentarily light our candles for this holiday. And before I conclude with my welcome, I want to thank Tim Alf and David Weeks, who are our voluntary technicians. It takes a lot to, in the space of 2 weeks, turn everything on its head and decide that we're going virtual and still to do it live from our meeting room. You'll also be hearing tonight the beautiful music of our incredible chorus and musicians, led ably by Ezra Donner. Thank you, Ezra. And we will begin by reflecting on this new year. That's why we're here, to consider our responsibilities to ourselves and to our society, to renew ourselves and our community. Our presence here, as Elaine alluded to, is to affirm our connection to Jewish heritage, whether we acquired it by birth, by choice, or by association. We gather to share with family, friends, and community, even in this format, the significance of this day, the first of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, the beginning of the New Year festival. With the setting of this evening's sun, united with Jews of every place and time, we proclaim a new year of hope. May these holiday lights inspire us to reflect upon the light in our lives and the warmth we find in the company of loved ones and community. I'd like to invite at this time Elaine and Kathy and John to light our New Year candles. All the stars are hidden, and the moon is dark tonight. In the wide expanse of heaven, north to south, not a ray of light. Light a bright candle in my heart's shadowed tent, and through the wide expanse of sky, the light will shine. Where there is sadness, let us offer love. Where there's fear, let us reach for hope. On this eve of the new year, may we bring light to one another.
Now is the time for turning. The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more towards the south. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. But for us, turning does not come so simply. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting that we have been wrong, and this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again, and this is always painful. It means saying, I'm sorry. It means admitting that we have the ability to change, and this is a difficult thing to do. These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. Let us return from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Let us turn around, let us face ourselves, let us face each other. For in isolation there is no life. But in community and companionship, there is love and joy and forgiveness.
On Rosh Hashanah, we sit in judgment of ourselves. Before the tribunal of reason and honesty, the roster of our deeds stands exposed. The reality of our daily lives meets the sharp scrutiny of our ideals. We want to be so much more than we are. We want to be wiser, kinder, and more confident in the act of living. We want to seize the world energetically and turn it to some urgent purpose. The valleys of dullness in which we wander threaten the meaningfulness of our lives, and we ache to ascend the peaks of excitement. Time passes far too quickly, and the boredom of routine is a terrifying symptom of wasted opportunity. We half live and fear the future. Each of us is capable of an unimagined greatness. Each of us is a treasure house of vital potential. Yet we allow hesitation and anxiety to inhibit the expression of our being. Past failure and present fear restrict the range of our feelings and thinking. While this day of meditation awakens us to the truth of who we are, it must also quicken within us the reality of what we can be. The words of Rabbi Sherwin Wein.
It is written in the book of Numbers, "Ubachodesh hashvi'i, bechad lachodesh, mikra kodesh yihye lachem, kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu, yom tru'ah yihye lachem." In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, there shall be an assembly, a cessation from work, a day of sounding the shofar.
For untold generations at this time, our ancestors listened to the sound of the shofar. What did they hear in its piercing tones? What solemn truths did they detect in its calls which stirred them so profoundly each year? And what does the shofar say to us today as we stand at the dawn of the new year, groping for wisdom and beliefs to sustain us? Tekiah, awake. Let not habit dull your minds, nor comfort harden your hearts. Examine your deeds. Look well into your lives. Mend your ways. As we hear the sharp Tekiah blast, let us rouse ourselves from smugness and self-satisfaction, from callousness and self-righteousness. Shvarim, the broken refrain. Listen to the staccato cry. Hear the echoes of sighing and weeping. The deprived and the distressed, the neglected and the enslaved, the bruised and the broken, all cry out for relief from their pain, for release from their torment. As we hear the anguished wail of Shvarim, let us open our ears to the cries of the afflicted and the oppressed, and let our hearts respond with compassion and love. Teruah, the call to battle is sounded. Join the struggle against evil and suffering. Give of your bread to those who hunger. Give of your strength to those who stumble. Give of your time to the lonely and forsaken. Heal the wounded. Comfort the bereaved. Let us hearken to the Teruah's call to action, for in our hands, in our hearts, and in our minds are the means for building a better world, for fulfilling the promise of peace and justice, and for hastening a day when these shall prevail throughout the world.
It is my honor now to call to the podium Gustav Lomelski. This is his first time to sound the shofar, and I will give the calls. Tekiah. Shvarim. Teruah. Tekiah Gdolah. Marvelous. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Progressive writer Marge Piercy wrote The Head of the Year. The moon is dark tonight, a new moon for a new year. It is hollow and hungers to be full. It is a black zero of beginning. Now you must void yourself of injuries, insults, incursions. Go with empty hands to those you have hurt and make amends. It is not too late. It is early and about to grow. Now is the time to do what you know you must and have feared to begin. Your face is dark too as you turn inward to face yourself, the hidden twin of all you must grow to be. Forgive the dead year. Forgive yourself. What will be wants to push through your fingers. The light you seek hides in your belly. The light you crave longs to stream from your eyes. You are the moon that will wax in new goodness. In the twilight of the vanishing year, our hearts are filled with a sense of gratitude. We are stirred by the memory of joy as the new year begins. We were sustained by love and kindness, comforted in times of sorrow, found happiness in our homes and gladness with our friends. As the new year begins, we join in happy song. But there were dreams that came to naught, and times when we refused to dream. These too we now remember as the new year begins. As the new year begins, contrition filled our thoughts. Some of our days were dark with grief. Many a tear for our cheeks, alas, for the tender ties that were broken. We look back with sorrow as the new year begins. As the new year begins, tears well up within us. Yet we look ahead with hope, grateful for this time of renewal, for the possibility of good to come. Let this Rosh Hashanah, celebration of life, be our day of renewal into life and peace, serenity and safety as the new year begins. As the new year begins, so is hope reborn in us.
Peace. We seek peace, the most precious gift we can bestow upon ourselves. May we find the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. May our country strive to be a stronghold of peace and its advocate among nations. May contentment reign within its borders, health and happiness within its homes. May we strengthen the bonds of friendship among the inhabitants of all lands, and may the love of humanity permeate every home and every heart. May we labor for righteousness, and in doing so, author a new book of life, blessing, and peace. For we alone are the source of peace.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
The light of life is a finite light. Like the holiday candles, light burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty, but soon it fades. Its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance, and our lives are full. But as night follows day, the candle of our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more and are no more seen. Yet, we do not despair. With our lives, we give life and love. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life.
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people, whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation, whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. On this Rosh Hashanah, we are aware of so much suffering in our country and across the world. We've had many losses in this congregation, fortunately few of them to the disease, but so many others throughout our nation suffer needlessly. We remember them tonight together with all the people who have perished since we were last together on Rosh Hashanah. We think of our loved ones whose death is recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Zecher Tzadikim Livracha, may the memory of good people bless our days, and may those memories provide us with a source of comfort as we face our life ahead in their absence. A humanistic interpretation of Kaddish, Nitgadal v'nitkadash beruach ha'adam, let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us, each in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May peace and justice permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth, and we say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Thank you to our choir for that beautiful rendition of Ode to Joy. That is than last year, and we hope that in the year to come it will be a little bit better than this year. This was already a better year. We did, after all, get a vaccine, right? But in other ways, some things seem to have gotten more difficult. We seem to be in a liminal period right now in our lives, a time when we're not quite in the greatest danger, but not quite feeling out of that yet. That's once again having the effect of dampening our joy at the onset of 5782. But we are grateful that we have our musicians, that we have our readers, our technicians, our temple staff. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Even if we are saddened that most of you are home watching this on YouTube. In so many ways, it seems like the very idea of a joyous holiday has been replaced by numbness, by the constant worries and anxieties that we've known since March 2020. But as I reflected on this, I thought to myself, is this not in some ways a microcosm of the human experience? Are we not always on the precipice of tears and laughter? The theme of my holiday talks this year is pandemic perspectives. Tonight, I'll invite us to think about the place in our lives for celebration, about how and why we must continue to rejoice, even or especially in the midst of hard times like this ongoing pandemic. Tomorrow, we'll give some consideration to how we deal with changes in our society and in our personal lives. And on Yom Kippur, we'll look at two other topics: relationships, personal and communal, and resilience. Over the past year and a half, our lives, and together with them our attitudes, have been filled with almost a solid stream of negativity. Our vocabulary has changed, supplemented by daunting and sometimes terrifying medical concepts. Our appearances have changed, our faces covered with masks. And our faith in our fellow citizens has hit an all-time low, knowing that we could get past so much of this if only they too would get vaccinated, wear masks when necessary, and cease their childish rebellions. If this weren't enough, many of us, myself included, have spent too much time consuming the news about all this negativity. Some of you have shared with me your, shall we call it, a kind of dependency on 24-hour cable and internet news and commentary, or doom scrolling through social media, as the young folks call it. And now your rabbi is talking about it on Rosh Hashanah. But as I hope to share with you, talking about our sorrows need not remove us from our joys. In fact, joy and sorrow are never really very far apart. You're probably familiar with the poems of Khalil Gibran. I recently learned that he is the third best-selling poet of all time, preceded only by William Shakespeare and Lao Tzu. When we look at his work, it's easy to account for that. He gets the human condition. His most popular work, The Prophet, includes a beautiful poem called Joy and Sorrow. I want to share it with you. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, And you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. Joy and sorrow are the inseparable twins of the human experience. It is often observed that we could never truly value our lives if we were immortal, because our appreciation of life is entirely dependent upon its transience. Likewise, we can never know true joy unless we have experienced its opposite. This, Gibran observes, is because joy and sorrow share the same source, the same wellspring. The sources of our happiness are frequently also the sources of our sorrows. And what brings joy today is destined to be mourned with its passing, to be interwoven with tearful recollections. As I reflect on Khalil Gibran's poem, I think back to my own great-grandmother. Growing up, I was fortunate to know and have a relationship with her until I was 17 years old. Grandma Annie, as we called her, lived with my grandparents on Miami Beach almost until the day she died at the age of 92 in 1978. She had known some very difficult times, especially as a young adult. She grew up in England, married while a very young woman, and immigrated to New York while pregnant with a husband who, more or less upon their arrival, abandoned her with no money and no means to return home. My great-grandmother somehow figured out a way to survive, raising my grandmother alone, knowing little rest until her daughter, my grandmother, married, and she found a home with her and her new son-in-law. And yet what I remember most about Grandma Annie was the way she looked at life. For her, the family that grew in the wake of her experience was her greatest source of joy. When my mother and her two brothers were born, my great-grandmother focused her attentions on them, doted on them, a third parent in their home upon whom they could rely at all times. Grandma Annie had few possessions of her own, but there was one thing, a little pin that she wore and deeply treasured. The pin had a little golden profile of each of her grandchildren, and attached to those, one for each of her great-grandchildren. These were tangible reminders of joys that had blossomed in the wake of her difficult past. And when she showed the pin to people, naming each loved one, she would smile, but she would also cry. Gibran's poem captures the reason why. As we grow older, increasingly mourning a past now gone, we find greater appreciation for the joys we have. Our eyes fill with tears when those times have passed, and yet we know that behind them is a truth. To love greatly is also to grieve the passage of time. The very young are confused when their elders cry at times of happiness, but we know why. We understand life's fragilities. And should we ever allow ourselves to forget, well, that's when challenging times, such as the ones we are living through, always seem to come around to remind us that this is so. And yet, as Gibran wrote, though gladness may be concealed and sadness may take its place, it's only because they share a source, by which he teaches us that whenever one is present, the other, of course, is with us too. Joy, remember, he said, is our sorrow unmasked. Reb Nachman of Bratslav was a pioneering Hasidic rabbi who was born in 1772, and his brief life lasted but 38 years. During that time, though, he attracted tens of thousands of followers, founding a Hasidic group that lives on to this day. His diverse teachings often included esoterical, mystical analyses that hold little interest for Jews like us, but he also had a talent for observing and understanding very common human experiences, something that probably accounts for much of his continuing popularity among Jews from all kinds of backgrounds. Reb Nachman, as he was known, probably attended a simcha, a joyous celebration or two in his time. At some point, at some wedding most likely, it prompted him to make this observation. Sometimes, he said, when people are happy and dancing, they grab someone outside the circle who is depressed and gloomy. Against that person's will, the happy dancing people bring the one who is depressed and gloomy into the circle of dancers. And almost against that person's will, they become happy alongside the others. What was the point of this small observation? Was he teaching us to live in denial, to pretend that we are not depressed when we are? Not at all. In fact, he was presaging an idea that is also taught by Professor Brené Brown. I think at this point it's safe to call her America's social worker in chief. She noted that joy is the most vulnerable of all human emotions, because to know joy means opening the door to sadness and to pain. Better, she teaches, to lean into those, for without them, we can't have joy. She writes, to love someone fiercely, to believe in something with your whole heart, to celebrate a fleeting moment in time, to fully engage in a life that does not come with guarantees. These are risks that involve vulnerability and often pain. When we lose our tolerance for discomfort, we lose joy. And how did Reb Nachman sum up his lesson that began with those dancers and their celebration of a fleeting moment in time? He said, "Great is one's ability to gather the courage to actually pursue gloom and introduce it into the joy. Thus will gloom transform itself into joy." He quoted a little biblical wisdom from the prophet Isaiah, who said, "They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing will flee away." But it doesn't, of course. It simply puts on its mask. Avoiding sadness is a wonderful way to never feel anything ever again. And that, of course, includes joy. Back in 1985, when I was in rabbinical school, I befriended an older man living in a nursing home in Jerusalem. Moshe was born in 1890 in Budapest, Hungary. At the time, it was one part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and a pretty good place to be a Jew, until it wasn't. In the Hungary in which Moshe was reared, Jews had enjoyed full citizenship since decades before he was born. Judaism was completely normalized. Hungary's Jews completely, fully integrated into society. This made things feel all that much more difficult when Europe returned to being, well, Europe, with its constant upheavals, its wars and pandemics, its economic displacement, and its anti-Semitism. Eventually, Moshe's once happy life became a living hell as Hungary turned to Hitler. When the war ended, Moshe's life and family had been devastated. In the wake of it, the only place he could resettle was Israel. And that was no picnic. It brought more struggle and more hardship. When I met Moshe, I was only 21 years old. Our get-togethers were part of my mitzvah project during that year of Israel-based studies. They were for me an opportunity to learn Jewish history from an eyewitness, someone who, as an adult, had lived and lost and recovered. But even as Moshe opened up about what happened, in ways that many Holocaust survivors never did, what I heard from Moshe was always a tale of gratitude. There were so many memories he shared of joy, each of them bringing a tear to his eye. Each tear also the harbinger of a smile that followed. Recollections of holiday celebrations and other special times with his family, of singing in his congregation's chorus. He sounded the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. He recalled for me his bar mitzvah, his parents' joy, and that which he felt on his own son's big day. In Moshe, I saw a stark contrast to another Holocaust survivor whom I knew very, very well. He was someone who never talked about his grief. He also barely cracked a smile, not for his children, rarely for his grandchildren. Despite the fact that he had rebuilt and created a comfortable life for himself and his loved ones, all was always darkness. Everything was gloom. Unlike Moshe, he had failed to see that only by embracing the tragedies of his life could he be open to joys. He denied himself the one because he so feared the return of the other. Many Jewish traditions reflect the inseparability of joy and sadness. The most iconic moment of a Jewish wedding is the breaking of the glass. Jewish law, you may not know, does not require that. And yet it's always there. The first thing every rabbi is asked, will there be a breaking of the glass? It's a small token, as I always say, of the brokenness of our world and our lives, coming as it does at the moment when our happiness is at its peak. It's a reminder of the fragility of life and that the human experience is one of both happiness and struggle. But when given the opportunity for some joy, we take it. There's an American Jewish joke that by now you have all heard. It sums up every Jewish holiday as, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. It's less funny to rabbis. We know it's actually not true. Nobody tried to kill us on Rosh Hashanah. We're still eating. I think the popularity of the joke speaks to a deeper awareness among regular, that is to say, normal, non-rabbi Jews. And it's this: life's tough. We've got woes aplenty. And just when we think we've eluded them, they always find us. But then our holidays come along, some of which surely are about suffering. And we fill our hearts with gladness through wine, and our bellies with apples and honey or jelly donuts or whatever your family's or community's traditions might be, such that we are gladdened once again. This attitude that celebration is a Jewish rite stands in stark contrast to so much of the actual lived Jewish experience. Just as Moshe's emphasis on what gave him joy stood in contrast with so much of the suffering he'd known in life. There's a story in the Talmud that says that the Jewish people did not fully take upon themselves their obligations as Jews until after they started celebrating Purim. Now, some take that to mean that they weren't willing to admit that they were Jews until they enjoyed salvation from Haman's wrath. But that's not my preferred interpretation. We already have Passover for the celebration of freedom from an evil leader's wrath. I believe the moral of the Talmud's tale is that until the Jews saw that this tradition was not going to be all about fear, all about they tried to kill us, they weren't that interested in whatever our tradition had to offer. It was only when they understood that there was going to be joy too, sometimes elevated to ridiculous levels like Purim, that they fully appreciated that our tradition and identities as Jews would be worthwhile, not just in spite of our suffering, but because we truly understood that the tradition would always offer a salve for it. As we enter this 10-day period of reflection, it is worth noting one more related rabbinical lesson about this period. This one a wordplay on the name of next week's holiday. The Vilna Gaon, a highly respected 18th century Lithuanian rabbi, noted that in the Torah, Yom Kippur is actually known as Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonements. And on this, he made a little play on words. Read it not, he said, as the Day of Atonements. Read it this way: a Yom, a day, Kippurim, Kippurim, like Purim. What did he mean by this? On a day when traditionally Jews pound their chest and wail and talk so much about loss, remember that a memorial service does stand at the center of its liturgy. He meant that even on a day like that, we can be filled with as much joy as we possess on Purim. How so? Yom Kippur brings with it the reminder that our lives, of course, will inevitably bring us both good and bad, the potential to lose and the potential to gain. But on Yom Kippur, he thought, we are going to be forward-looking. During these 10 days, we are going to look to the future. Why else, of course, would we seek forgiveness? Would we pursue personal growth and change if we were not looking forward to the life we have ahead of us? And the only reason to look forward to the life ahead of us is for the possibilities it will offer. Among those, a future that includes joy. This pandemic has separated us from so much of what gives us joy, from community, from friends, from family, and from simchas, celebrations of life cycles and other achievements. And yet, what helped those of us who were fortunate to survive it hang on was the prospect that even as we suffered, we had hope. On this Rosh Hashanah, we are still apart, and that's still sad. But most of us by now have had the opportunity to reunite with those who give us joy. Weddings are back. B'nai Mitzvah are being celebrated. The promise of gladness is in the air, once again to balance our sorrows. But let's make no mistake, there will always be some gloom. There will always be a mirror. They will always be a mirror for our joy. Remember what Khalil Gibran said, when you are joyous, look deep into your heart and you shall find it is only that which is giving you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. That's why my great-grandmother cried. May we each have reason to find joy and to appreciate our weeping in the year that lies in front of us. L'Shana Tova, happy 5782 to everyone. We conclude now with these hopes for the new year. May it be good and sweet, a year of joy and happiness, a year of love and understanding, a year of peace and friendship, a year in which the hope in our hearts is made real by the deeds of our hands. L'Shana Tova to everyone here, L'Shana Tova to you at home. Happy New Year. We will close with Peace be with you.